Hey, you okay there?
Yeah, I'm okay. Just trying to find some motivation.
Oh, yeah. Motivation's hard. But, you still have a channel to run. And an audience.
Says the one who has posted a single video of her narrating the first chapter of a classic book 2 years ago and hasn't updated since.
Well, I mean, when you put it that way. But that's not what we're here to talk about. You promised us something that would whip us into a frenzy. It's been almost a year. That's long enough to frenzy. Don't you think it's time to post the video?
You make an excellent point.
I usually do.
I knew I kept you around for a reason. I had that health stuff last year, and then it was time to tackle Christmas stuff, and then I just wanted to make dolls and not videos.
Hey, remember what your tagline is?
Where we make whatever we feel like at the moment?
Exactly. You didn't feel like it at the moment. And if you're not in the headspace to do the thing, then just come back to it later.
You're right. Yeah, okay. You know what? It is time to do a video. It's a new year, I've got new motivation, new dolls. With all this new stuff going on, I think it's time for one more new thing. Me.
Wait, you're not a blue Twi'lek?
Yep, while on hiatus, I finally sat down and made a proper mini-me doll. Pretty fabulous, am I right?
Who even are you?
Alright, last video I promised you something that would cause a frenzy, and now it's finally time to deliver. Folks, it's time we return to Monster Hunter High. As I have previously talked about, Monster Hunter is my favorite video game series. It is very much a what it says on the box kind of game. You do, in fact, hunt monsters. And then you skin them and make them into fancy hats and bigger weapons. I'm a simple girl, this is all I really need in a game. The most recent game in the series is Monster Hunter Rise, with its expansion Sunbreak. When we last left off, Sunbreak had just gotten a title update featuring a particularly iconic monster that just so happens to be my sister's favorite. Why is that relevant? Simple, she keeps me in secondhand dolls to use as customizing bases, so it was definitely time to thank her for supporting my habit and make her a doll. Now, my sister being my sister, she had to go for one of the more extra dramatic and goth monsters in the series. Her favorite is the frenzy virus spreading Black Eclipse Wyvern, Gore Magala. He was the flagship monster for Monster Hunter 4 and formed the basis for that game's franchise revolutionizing plotline. Also, the 4th gen introduced the insect glaive, and I'm just saying, best weapon. I look forward to your comments. Monster Hunter 4 and its expansion, 4 Ultimate, have a plotline focused around solving a mystery regarding the origin of a golden scale that one of your NPC buddies has come across. You join the caravan, with the capital C, gather a small cohort of quirky characters, and investigate the origins of an ominous plague that is spreading and driving monsters berserk. Spoilers for a 10-year-old game, but the source of the plague is Gore Magala, a sightless, aggressive juvenile wyvern who sheds this virus alongside fine scale particles as part of how it sees its surroundings. It's a very cool design for a monster and makes for loads of memorable fights, and its mere presence in a region is shown to have massive impacts on the ecosystem as it infects all the large monsters in the area with its zombie-like virus. Fast forward 9 years and 2 mainline games later, and Gore Magala has made a triumphant return in Sunbreak along with his adult form, Shagaru Magala. So let's get started on this bad boy. Each monster in Monster Hunter is used as the basis for a unique armor set and collection of weapons, and they went hard with the designs for Gore Magala's gear. His armor reminds me a lot of the Death Knights from World of Warcraft, very intricate and very menacing. I'm going to lean into this theme and call him an Eclipse Knight, as Gore Magala's canonical nickname is the Black Eclipse Wyvern. As a bonus, this will be my first male doll. I picked Neighthan Rot as a base since he was already pretty dark and I wouldn't have to recolor him too much. The amount of sculpting I'm going to do is also going to nicely conceal the sculpting already on the original doll. Neighthan is meant to be a unicorn and zombie hybrid. Please don't ask me how that works. And as such, he has these sort of withered, probably meant to be rotted, sculpted bits on parts of his body. The Monster High dolls are both delightful and vexing for me as a customizer. On one hand, I love the unique sculpts and details on both the original line and on the new generation dolls. On the other hand, these built-in details mean you have to either work around them or figure out ways to incorporate them into the final piece. In this case, I'm just going to encase them in about half a pound of Apoxie Sculpt. I prepped the doll by removing his tail, horn, and hair, scraping out the icky gluey hair plugs and wiping off his factory paint with some acetone. One cool thing about the Monster High boys is that they actually have articulated ankles. This is going to be the basis of a cunning plan that I shall reveal to you right now. I cut off his toes with a saw and then drill a few holes into each foot. These become the anchor point for some armature wires so he can have actual dragon feet. The ankle joint means that he can stand up on his tippy toes and be posed, so he'll actually stand up on his own when I'm done. And that's all the prep work finished. Time to go right into the sculpting. There is a lot of sculpting involved in this guy, but it's almost all scales. I bulk up certain areas first with Apoxie Sculpt or air dry clay, like the basic shapes for his face and his feet, before coming back in with a second layer and working in the scale shapes. I spend a lot of time looking at references of Gore Magala as I work. The creatures of Monster Hunter tend to have these very busy and detailed designs, so it was a real challenge figuring out how to break down everything and simplify it so I could recreate it. I take a lot of care around his joints so that they're still able to move around. His face was really the most important part because after the overall silhouette created by his wing arms and cloak-like wings, Gore Magala's face is actually really distinctive. This is another blind monster, though unlike Kezu, Gore Magala is blind because he's an undeveloped juvenile. Later on in his life cycle, he'll molt and become Shagaru Magala and will develop eyes as part of that process. In the meantime, he has these feelers, and I did take a little bit of liberty with those. These are normally hidden, then pop out and glow bright purple when he's in rage mode. However, I was really concerned about making little sticky outy bits on this doll because I was either going to have to mail him to my sister, who lives across the country, or pack him in a suitcase and travel with him to bring him to her. So I decided to leave them flat along his head and pick them out with bright paint later on. Alright, we are done with the sculpting. Before painting, I go over his joints with a black Sharpie so they'll stand out less when the paint inevitably chips around those areas. The painting is pretty straightforward. I build up shades of a dark, dusky purple and teal blue, then pick out all that sculpted detail with a dark wash made by mixing ultramarine blue and burnt umber acrylic paint with a bunch of water. I've come to prefer mixing blue and brown to make a dark charcoal sort of color and using that for my shading instead of black, because pure black will just really flatten colors out and dull everything down. Once the wash is dry, and it does take a while since there's so much water in a wash, I went back and dry brushed over the high points and edges of the sculpt with a lighter gray. His chest and stomach get picked out with highlights and lowlights to bring out the sculpting of the original doll. The streaks along his head get an undercoat of white paint first to make the colored paint that I lay in over it show up better against the dark base. You have to be careful with acrylic paints because a lot of them are actually more transparent than completely opaque, and so if you just layer those over a dark base, you're not going to get the true bright color that you might be looking for. The whole doll gets a couple of coats of satin varnish to protect the paint. I make a very simple tail for him out of this snakeskin textured fabric. On the top side, I attach these plates cut out of stiff felt to add some texture and interest. The whole thing then gets stuffed with leftover yarn fluff from making wefts and sewn onto a wire armature. I use some paint to pick out the scale details and continue the color scheme from the body so everything kind of blends together. Once I have a nice thick tail all made up, I glue the wire into the hole at the base of his spine from his original tail. With so much work put into the sculpt, I didn't want to cover it all up with armor. At the same time, a Dark Knight needs some armor. So I stitched up a very simple tunic with a kind of ragged hem out of some faux black leather and cut my armor pieces out of some craft foam. Craft foam is great stuff to work with. It's lightweight and super easy to cut, and by applying a little bit of heat and getting creative with your layering, it's easy to make whatever shapes you need. I etched details into the foam by repeatedly going over them with a mechanical pencil. After that, it's time for more paint. I found this nifty fluorescent purple gouache paint for the glowy bits that look really great against the base colors. Despite the obvious superiority of the insect glaive, my sister prefers the charge blade. So let's give our Eclipse Knight a charge blade. These are very simply constructed out of more craft foam. The blade half of the charge blade gets glued onto a short wooden stick, and I attached a loop of elastic to the hilt to help him hold onto it. The shield half also gets loop of elastic glued onto the back so he can slip it over his arm. The last major component are his wings. Gore Magala and his relatives are known for having very robust wings that they can use almost like additional arms. They're equipped with powerful talons, and the wing membranes themselves flow like a very dramatic and slightly fluffy cape when he has them folded along his back. I took inspiration from another property that features characters with wings that fold like capes: gargoyles. To make his wings, I first sculpt a pair of folded wing arms that fit over his shoulders, adding details to the scales and talons in subsequent passes. The whole construction gets painted to match the body. The last step is adding the wing membranes. Gore Magala is unique in that his wing membranes are covered in a very fine, hair-like set of scales that give them a fuzzy, almost velvety appearance. The fine scales break off into a cloud of dust particles that both allow the Gore Magala to sense his surroundings and carries along with it a dose of the frenzy virus. To mimic this velvety appearance, I cut wing membranes from a faux black leather, laying them so that the wrong side of the material is on top, so you get more of this suede-y sort of texture. On the undersides, I brighten up the material with a bit of faux paint. The membranes get glued onto the wing arms, and they're all finished. And with that, the Black Eclipse Wyvern is done. I gotta say, this doll was a struggle. I had a lot of trouble with health and motivation issues while working on him, and for a couple of months there, it felt like I was never actually going to get him finished. Kind of the only reason he actually did get finished was because I had a family trip planned and I wanted to bring him along to give to my sister in person. Sometimes the best motivation is a looming deadline and the threat of a little sister unleashing the puppy dog eyes. Still, he's finally done, and he does make a cool, if temporary, addition to the Monster Hunter High lineup. Overall, I really do like him. There's a few things I'd consider going back and fixing or redoing, sure, but that's mostly a reaction to how much I struggled while working on him. He's now safely ensconced in my sister's care, and he definitely seems to be the star of her collection. That about wraps up this video. I do apologize for taking so long to get this one out. I'm feeling a lot more motivated now, and I'm hoping to become a bit more regular with posting videos. I've already joined this group of really fabulous doll customizers here on YouTube as well as Discord, and so I'm hoping to join some collaborations with them here in the near future. Keep an eye out for those. There may also be a few other upgrades in the near future as well. If you're excited for that, or if you just like finally seeing the creation of Gore Magala, consider booping that like and subscription button. Thank you for joining me on SilverGryphon Makes a Thing, where we make whatever we feel like at the moment.